about. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my comrade, Jim Como, who is going to start today's session. And if you have any questions that you want to make sure that we address during this session, please add them to the chat on the side, and we will get to everyone's questions, and we'll stay on as long as we continue to have questions from you. So Jim, you want to go ahead and get started, and we'll go over what we want to provide to you, the information, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. I haven't been called a comrade in a while, but there you go. Yeah, so my name's Jim Como. I'm one of the other assistant directors in the Office of Federal Programs. As Diane alluded to, we're just going to talk briefly here about compliance, what you should expect from compliance this year. It's going to look a little different maybe, but just kind of set the groundwork for that to start us off. I don't know if we'll speak for 15, 20, 30 minutes, but like Diane alluded to, we'll be here taking your questions, through the hour. Okay. Thanks for joining us. The first thing I want to touch on, excuse me, is the timing of compliance. You should expect to see a letter from your consultant, or those of you who have multiple reviews across the department. You'll see a consolidated letter, one letter from the department across various offices. But you should expect to see that letter towards the end of November. We do expect the compliance system itself to be available to you beginning mid-December. There are some changes that Diane will go into that are a result of us moving based approach to this program that will kind of push it into December. And so that is that. Again, that letter will convey to you whether or not you have an on-site or a desk review or a self-survey. Obviously, just briefly, I want to touch on those three different approaches. Self-survey is just as it suggests. Your district will fill out some information and submit that information, including documents supporting it. We would strongly encourage you. It's one of the factors that we use in determining who gets different levels of surveillance in this process. But I definitely encourage you to complete it by the end of May, because that is the target for those. For the on-site, let me back up and go to the desk. The desk reviews will be the same as they have been in the past. Again, it is, question-driven. Documents are provided. You'll work with your consultant, and those documents will be reviewed. There might be follow-up from your consultant to clarify or to get additional information on any of the documents or information you provide. On sites, we do not know right now, what they're going to look like. We fully suspect that they will be conducted remotely. So we do not think we're going to physically go on site. That being said, they still will be more in depth than the desk reviews. So what will that entail? It will likely entail us setting up meetings, via, whatever technology is most comfortable to you. At the department, we tend to use Microsoft Teams. But if that's not available to you, we'll work with you and, go to Skype or go to Zoom or Google Meets. We'll figure that out. But whereas we ordinarily would go on site, so on location, and visit with central office personnel as well as building personnel, we'll just need to set up meetings. So on the one hand, it'll be easier for you. You don't have to worry about us being in your building for that time. On the other hand, it's going to be a little bit more complicated because we're going to have to coordinate technology and people's schedules in a remote fashion. So the long and short of it is there is still going to be something we call an on-site. It is not going. It's likely not going to be on-site, but it will be a little bit more. It will be more in depth than the desk reviews. We still, for example, would expect to have meetings with your non-public, liaison, as well as non-public schools, to make sure that those things are going on in the right fashion, as well as meetings with your building staff. So that would require us to set up, some sort of communication with principals or other leaders in your buildings. I do want to, before turning it over to Diane, to get into kind of the nitty-gritty and important stuff of compliance. I do want to reiterate kind of, our philosophy here. And admittedly, this, might have changed over the last, say, 5 years or 10 years. If you think about how, No Child Left Behind was developed, it was very much a compliance-driven system, whether we're talking about accountability or, in our case, in terms of grants, grant funding from federal programs. We genuinely, and I speak for Diane, and if Morgan's here, I speak for him as well. Morgan Brown's the third assistant director in the office. We genuinely believe that this is a support mechanism. This is not punitive. We identified districts and community schools, for that matter, that we think might need support. And if you need us to allude to some of the ways we identify them, we can. But we try to support you. It's not punitive. We're not here to play gotcha. We're here to help you develop your systems, to run your programs more efficiently, and to provide these services to students more efficiently and more effectively. We're not, like I said, we're not trying to second guess you. We're not trying to play gotcha. We're just trying to help you out. That help, you might have auditors, for example, that come in later, and they're going to look at things differently. But if you follow some of the approaches we give you, it should make those reviews easier. And so I just wanted to kind of reinforce, this is not punitive. This really, in our view, is seen as support. Much of the feedback we get from the field, while, I'll be honest, many of you don't like to talk, don't like us to go on site or have the in-depth with your desk. You might not like it, but much of the feedback we get is, appreciative of the support. And so, I just would encourage you to take that approach if you can. And so that is what I'd say about our philosophy there. Diane, good. I'm glad somebody chimed in there. Diane, why don't we turn it over to you to kind of talk about the nitty-gritty of some of the compliance, the system, and I'll go on mute for a little while.
Okay, thank you. So Jim was correct. It's scheduled to open up. It was scheduled to open up the end of November. We're now looking at the middle of December, which is similar to when it opened up last year, with it moving to the cloud, as well as our IT office working on all the updates with the new One Needs assessment at this time. They've had to push it back a little bit. So just so that you know, you will be receiving notification from your concerning what kind of review you will have this year. Those are scheduled to be out by the end of November, and then the system will open up in December for you. It's going to be a very different and new system than what you currently have. It's similar, though, to the One Needs assessment system. They're using the same platform to create the cloud version for the new compliance system. We do plan on providing some training on navigating the new system once the new system is up and running. However, at this time, it's not available yet. There's some videos also that will be provided for you to be able to view, and we are updating all of our manuals along with this, so you'll even have a manual or a hard copy of something to go through to help you with navigating the new system. If you've been in the One Needs assessment before, you're going to remember that it is similar to the, I'm sorry, I'm trying to share my screen and talk at the same time. So that's not always smart, is it? It's similar to what you will see when you're working with the One Needs assessment. And I do have a screen to show you. So in the One Needs assessment, there are sections, and then underneath each section are group questions. The One Needs, the compliance system will be set up in a similar manner. So our sections will be the difference. And then you will have groups of questions around the different components or criteria for the One Needs assessment. So here is an example of what it will look like. So example for this one here, let me make it a little bit bigger for you. They have required on this section, there are 14 overall items in here. Ours will be grouped around our sections. For example, you have your first grouping will be parents' right to know, and you will have 3 to 4 questions to answer around those question groupings and to upload your evidence or documents for those. The questions we do, so you can expect to see a section for Title I, Title II, and Title IV IDEA. If you receive Title III, you will have a for that, as well as non-public uniform guidance section will be in there. We will get sections, which are required items for anyone that is for any of those documents that are really across all of our grants. The federally funded spreadsheet and the properly licensed items will be a separate section. Everyone to complete, and the evidence-based criteria will also be a separate section in here with a group of questions around evidence-based criteria. The documents and the support papers will be in the document library. We will have some links embedded within the applications on them, and it will get you to those areas that the links that have that document for you. For example, the federally funded spreadsheet will be linked. Other documents will not be specifically linked in the system, but we will have in the document library the manuals and the forms that we've provided in the past for you to be able to have access to, such as if we're going to be doing an on-site, we will go to your title building and meet with your staff and your principals there. So we have the building worksheet for those buildings so that they can review it and look at what are the kind of questions that we ask, and then be able to answer there, and be able to answer those questions and not feel, they can prepare. And also, what are the types of evidence that we're going to ask to see at the building level versus the things that we would ask for at the district level, that will be available in the document library. I did want to also let you know that besides the federally funded spreadsheet and the evidence-based spreadsheet being separate, since they're requested or asked across multiple grant areas, there will be included in this year's consolidated compliance, the non-competitive school improvement grant. If your district or you have a building that received that grant, then they would have that in their compliance questions. And then the ESSER grant will also be in the consolidated application compliance. So we will be reviewing ESSER during our desk reviews and our on-sites, as well as you will be reviewing it then yourself for your self-surveys. And then finally, Jim and I wanted to share with you some of the most common errors that we saw last year with the compliance reviews. And one of those was in the area of time and effort documentation. There's some things that, as you're looking at how are you documenting your time and effort, that you really want to think about, well, is this position going to be a position in which we can do a single source certification for, which means that this position is paid for out of one fund, and they are doing the same duty all day long. They don't have different jobs or activities that they are doing. Or is this going to be a position in which we're going to have to be able to provide an activity report for, which is your time and effort documentation? So things to keep in mind is, for the single source certification, you need to have this done twice a year, and they need to be done or completed after the work has been completed or done. So we typically recommend that you do it at the end of the first semester and then the second semester. Some will do it at the end of the year. So they'll start a new one beginning on January the 1st, and then they do the last one on June the 30th. Either way is fine. You just need to make sure that it is at the end of the work and that it's appropriately dated to show that it was signed at the end of the work time. If you have someone who is split funded, which means that they're paid out of multiple funds, however, they're doing the same position or the same job, you would want to attach to that single source cert or provide evidence showing that they are doing the same position or the same job. It could be their schedule that shows all day they're teaching in this one classroom, or that all day they're providing coaching across the district and they're not doing anything else. Or it could be your contract with them that specifically states the position that they are being paid for. You need to have something to show that that's actually, even though it's split funded, it is only one job that they are doing. If you have someone who is doing more than one position, let's say they are coaching for half a day and the other half of the day they're providing instructional support, and they are split funded, then you would need to show their activity report as well. And if they have a regular set schedule that shows the division of that work, then they can you can simply attach that to a single source cert. However, if they have a position where it's different every day, they don't have a set schedule as far as when they're doing the different their different roles, then they need to keep a time and effort log so that they're showing that not only the percentage or the amount of time each day that they're performing for the two different activities. Now, in your application and in your budgeting, you typically estimate the percentage of time that they will be spent towards those activities. However, in your expenditures, it really needs to reflect the actual time. So let's say if you estimate that they're going to be 50-50 in the budget. However, if you actually looked at their time and effort documentation, it's really showing that they're doing one job 60% of the time and the other job only 30% of their time. Then the charges that are actually charged to those grants need. So if they're actually teaching 60% of the time and paid out of Title I, then 60 for Title I should pick up 60% of the cost. Whereas Title II, they're doing coaching and you're paying them with Title II, then 30% of the cost would be charged to Title II. And this would be true for even if you have those who are underneath a contract or purchase services. You still need to be able to show that what is getting charged to the grant is actually is accurate. So even if you have a contract and you're paying someone else to provide you a staff member to perform this work, you also would still need to have them do time and effort documentation for that. So those were the areas that we found often there wasn't a clear understanding out in the field last year, and we worked with districts to help them understand what they needed to do to accurately and appropriately document time and effort and to charge the grants. So I'm going to turn it back to Jim. He has another area that we found was often missed as we were working on our compliance issues last year.
Hey, Diane, before you kind of mute yourself, if you're going to, I don't know if you are, there was a question along the side whether or not the new coordinators meeting on Thursday will have different content or will it be much the same information? I know you tend to kind of be more involved with those.
It will be different. It's going to be a little more about how do you even get ready and start and organize for a compliance visit. What are the things that you would need to do in the district to set up and to get ready before we come, and what is the purpose and intent and compliance and those things for new consultants.
And I swear I'm not trying to, not have to talk, but Terry had a question kind of specific to the time and effort logs. How often should you do a reconciliation of that? Should you do it twice a year, per pay period, per month? Do you have any kind of guidance you could kind of offer the group in terms of that?
We recommend it's recommended in the federal law that it's done at each pay period. It should be done at least quarterly at the minimum, where you would go in and reconcile those expenditures so that it would align with your time and effort documentation that you have. The minimal would be each quarter, I would think.
Thanks for that, Diane. And now I actually will talk, I guess, since yeah. So the other area that we want to touch on, Diane's area applied obviously to traditional districts, community schools. All of them have to tend to time and effort logs, for instance. The other concern we wanted to, not concern so much as area, that we wanted to remind people of really is for traditional districts, and that is non-public equitable service. So this can run primarily we're looking for documentation. So if you think of that process begins with ongoing, continuing, meaningful consultation with your non-publics. So you should be able to document that. You should be able to provide emails, other communications, minutes of meetings, etc., for that process. But also there's some things that you probably view as kind of basic to particularly Title I programs in your own buildings that we need to remind you that you need to do with your non-publics as well. So for instance, parent compacts, parent meetings, etc. Those kinds of things need to be done for providing non-public equitable service just as they would for your own schools and your own buildings. Similarly, developing and implementing multi-criteria framework for identifying which students receive services. And an important part of this is reminding yourselves that this needs to take place whether you are engaging in the actual provision of service or whether you are contracting out for this. So for example, if you engage an ESC to provide these services, or if you have a memorandum of understanding to provide these services, the district, it's still a responsibility of the district, the LEA, to provide these non-public equitable services. And so, your ability to document that is important. Again, even though they're not necessarily your buildings. And so that is the other thing I would like to add. So, those are the two areas we wanted to kind of point out to you. Obviously, our reviews include everything from teacher licensure to a bunch of other areas in the department that you don't always get the oversight from. But in order to comply with the grants requirements that Diane alluded to and the Title I requirements, these are the kinds of things we ask. So I don't have anything too much further to delve into on the non-public side. And so I guess we would just open it up for questions. If there are any questions, or Diane, is there anything else I needed that I forgot to say?
You didn't, but I did. I did want to point out too that you're going to notice with the questions this year that we are asking more and more, how are you evaluating if what you're doing is working? And what is the evidence that you're actually are evaluating that what you're doing and how you're using the grant funds is being effective? We're trying to one align to what's required in federal guidance and federal law, that districts and buildings evaluate to see if it's effective what they're doing. They don't keep doing the same thing just because that's how they've always used these funds. They actually are looking at data to see what if it needs tweaking or if they really need to do something different because they haven't seen an improvement based on how they're using the funds in the past. So that's going to be something that you'll notice. If you're in the OIP process and you've got your DLTs and your BLTs and your TBTs working and they're working effectively, then that would be evidence from that would show that your evaluation. I do encourage you to specifically have that as one of the questions that you use in your DLT meetings. Is this working? This is how we're using, this is what we're doing for improvement areas, and are they really working? Are they effective? at this point, or do we need to do something else and spend our funds differently? So I did have a hand raise and it went down. So
No, I see a hand from
Ann.
Ann.
You probably, I don't know, can you unmute yourself, Ann? Candace, is Ann able to unmute? Here we go. Let me see if I can unmute you. I found you.
And I've got it grayed out to unmute her. So I'm unable to unmute. There's a shortcut if you're calling in tune. I know there's a shortcut to unmute. Is it *6 or *9?
I believe it's *6.
*6. We possibly lost her.
No, she's still here. I can't seem to unmute her as I was able to unmute. Oh, there she is now. Ann, I've got you unmuted.
Okay, well, this is an Ann. I didn't actually mean to raise my hand, but I can ask a question. I guess I'm always wondering about a time and effort log and the single funding papers. I mean, are the ones I can just never find a great time and effort log that someone, is out there. I mean, what do you guys want us to use? And I was just looking in the resource library to see if there's something good out there.
So yeah, we have one that's been in the document library for years, and I used it in the district, but it is one that's it may not necessarily be aligned with the position. So I know that if you have them use timesheets, those are time and effort logs. You just want to make sure that in their timesheet, they have a section where they're actually putting down the activity that they're doing. I have had positions in the past where I actually just created a time and effort log around the different duties. And they actually then just completed that each time they turned it in. And we asked them to turn those in once a month, our time and effort logs, because we paid once a month, which was painful for many. But that's something that you can do as well. There are, if you reach out to your federal programs consultant, they can send you some samples. We have one in our doc library, but I know that Tiffany Winters has also provided some samples herself. And if there's someone who is, they have a regular schedule, it's typically, if you use Dazzle or what program you use, there's a report in there that you can run and just attach that shows their daily schedule. So you may want to check with your secretaries in the buildings to see if they have that. If not, having the teacher create their weekly schedule and submit it to you would suffice too.
Okay, and that's I've kind of done that, but it just seems too easy sometimes. And I just want to make sure we're doing it the right way.
You are, and that weekly schedule or regular schedules came out with some of the flexibilities that the federal government provided on time and effort documentation. I think it was around 2015-14 that they came out with that flexibility, that if they have a set schedule, a regular schedule, that actually can be their time and effort documentation.
Okay, and then I'm gonna ask one other quick question then about like the single funding form. Is that under the Title I part in this section also? I mean, that form has been old for a while. Is it still the old form?
Yeah, it's not really changed a whole lot, that old single source cert form.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Diane, along the side, we have a question not directly related to compliance, but here we are. And so, the person asked, can we use federal funds for equity training considering the president's recent order? I'm gonna let you answer that.
Your email. Yeah, I just forwarded your email because I have not heard anything or received anything from the U.S. federal government telling us that Title IV funds cannot be used for equity training or diversity training. I know that the president signed an executive order. I'm not so sure that that executive order applied to our federal entitlement grants, especially Title IV, since that's one of the specific allowable activities really with that grant. So at this time, we have not received anything telling us that districts cannot use federal funds for diversity or equity training, especially if you've already planned it for the year. You're in the middle of contracts. I would expect that if there's, we may hear for next year's planning and guidance, but not in the middle of the year. It's unusual for them to come out after the fact to say that you can't spend it. So I will get with you, Sue, as soon as I sent this to see if I had anyone else for this, to see if anyone else has heard anything, but we have not. I have not.
Yeah, and so the other thing I would add is the executive order was from the end of September, and they had the departments all had 60 days to identify those programs which were impacted, and like Diane alluded to, there's nothing we have seen yet, but if we see anything, we will communicate that out.
Otherwise, just move ahead with what you had planned because it was already approved.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question about class size reduction.
Mm-hmm.
So you have your title teachers and they're supporting your virtual students. However, you also pull them as subs at times because subs are very hard to secure. And that obviously can't be considered a set schedule. It would require a time and effort documentation or some payroll records. So here's, if you're taking your Title I teachers and if you're pulling them to substitute for regular ed teachers that are out, you cannot pay them that day out of Title I funds because they're not performing the duties or the work of Title I on that day. They're actually performing your regular education duties that day. Typically, most districts, or I hope, would have a form that they use for substitutes where they document when a teacher is out and who substituted for that teacher. That would be suffice then to show that if you're doing that and they show that the Title I teacher subbed, and that is used then to determine, how to charge for those subs that day. And hopefully the treasurer is making those adjustments then once they get the sub sheets that they're taking the daily rate for that title teacher. And if she ended up being pulled 3 days, that pay period to sub instead of providing title services, then the general fund picked up the cost of those subs. Now, if she is out and she has a sub, you can use Title I to pay for your title teacher sub. So if you're not necessarily budgeting for sub costs for your title teachers, you may want to thinking about adding that into your budget. And if you are pulling her to cover as a sub due to COVID, ESSER could be used to cover for her daily rate as a sub, because she's covering for teachers who aren't out. So just think about some of those other things that you could use instead of hitting your general fund for those costs, especially right now during the pandemic. And I know there's not enough subs out there to cover everyone. Okay, so I think, did I answer your question, Tricia? I hope. Just your payroll, your payroll records could show if she was charged to general.
Yes, thank you. That does help a lot. And I'll check with our treasurer to see if there is a form that substitutes fill out. I'm not familiar with that. Thank you.
Typically, your building secretaries will keep a log and submit that to payroll, but.
Okay, great. I'll check. Thanks so much.
So yes, that includes staffing for your third-party providers for non-publics as well. You need to be able to time and effort documentation for anyone that's paid with federal funds. So, and a semi-annual certs for those. Typically, you would have the building principal or their direct supervisor would sign off on those. Okay, do we have any other questions? So everybody's ready for us to come visit, right? That's correct, Sue. I wish we could just come and visit instead of us being compliance. Just come and visit and sit down and just talk sometimes about what's going on. And maybe if you consider our compliance visits as an opportunity for us to, we can really look at specifically now your district and what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, and help you figure out ways that you can really use the extra resources you get to do that. Because that's really what we want to do is help you figure out how can these resources be that extra push that the district needs to help them get over to achieve the things that they're trying to achieve and reach their goals. So somebody had their hand up. I think it was it Rosemarie? Let me see, Rose, if we can unmute you.
Can you hear me?
I can. There you are.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you did it or if I did it.
Okay. My question is, we are the non-public Title I provider for the surrounding districts. And when you talked about the different documents that needed to go to the non-public school, such as the parent contract, the parent right to know, all of the other documentation that we would normally send out to our district. Do these other districts need to send that out as well? Or does it just need to come from our district since we are the service provider?
Any district that has students that are at a non-public that is receiving equitable services would be required. They are responsible for making sure that the documentation and all the compliance items are met. However, they can decide how do they want to do that. And it really depends upon the contract. So if they, in their contract with their provider, add in the contract that the provider will provide the parent compact, they will make sure that there is a parent engagement activity provided. Parents' right to know notice is included in the Title I handbook for parents at that non-public, those extra things, then the provider would be doing those for the district and then providing that documentation to the district. But however, in the end, the responsibility falls on the district, and it falls on each district that has students there at that non-public that are receiving equitable services. So let's say we have a non-public and there are 5 districts, and 4 of them contract with the public district to provide their equitable services for them. We would still, if we would come in and do a visit, each of those districts would be responsible for having evidence showing that the compliance items were met. And they would need to have that evidence that's specific for their district. Now, in some cases, there have been districts that have been able to pull together and sit down and work together. And they've come up with one parent compact that's for that non-public that those districts agree with. And they've also worked together on the multi-criteria selection process. And it doesn't have each individual district's title on it. It has the non-public's name on the top. The biggest thing would be in the multi-criteria selection process, it would need to identify which students are from which district so that it can show that that district's equitable service requirements were met and that those children were ranked ordered according to their district or buildings that they came from. Unless you guys do a non-public pooling. And I'm not sure if you've heard of pooling before, but there is an option of doing a pooling where all the districts agree to pool their funds together to provide the equitable services to the non-public. Then you would not have to separate by districts in the multi-criteria selection process. Any child that's coming from those 5 districts that are pooling would be able to, you would be able to spend those funds for regardless of their district of residency. So you could actually have a district that could have funds in that pool who actually none of their students in the district would be receiving equitable services because there are other students that have a higher need from other districts. So that would be an option. And if you want to explore that, Chantel Carter, our non-public ombudsman, can work with you on how that could be set up.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
And this is Ann, and I partner with Rosemary, so I appreciate the information about that. So you're saying if I'm contracting with her, I can just use her, if we're in agreement, I can use her forms and her parent right to know and parent compact, and just make sure I have copies of those if there's ever a review, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And where we've seen challenges before is where we come to visit you, Ann, in your district, and you say, oh, well, the other district is handling all this, right? But it's incumbent upon you as the LEA to make sure you have the documentation. So, some of it is trust. You know what I mean? Like, how much do you trust Rose? And maybe she's doing,
Right.
and I don't mean to cast stones here, but, it's, it is, she said she was doing it and she's taking care of it. Well, we've gotten into situations before where the district that's hosting it doesn't have the right documentation and they're not being reviewed necessarily, but we're reviewing you. And so we're asking you for it. So.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. And I do completely trust Rosemary, but I think it's probably a good idea for me to get that stuff on file. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, we're all learning together, that's for sure.
And another thing to also remember, it's also the monitoring of the student's progress that the public district is responsible for.
Yep.
So, you need to make sure that you're providing those equitable services, but then also, are the students making progress? Is it working? The services that you're providing, are they effective? So you want to also make sure that you're requesting a progress report, whether it's each 9 weeks or something to show how the students that are receiving those services are doing in their programs. So that's something that often is missed is the monitoring of the students. But I don't know about many of you, but I know in so many areas for the non-publics, they're available at the elementary level and at the middle school sometimes, but by the time they get to middle school or high school, often they're returning to their home districts because there isn't a secondary level non-public. We don't have that in our area. We only have elementary, or they want to participate in the programs that are available at the secondary. So you never know when they're going to come back and actually be on your campus. So you want to make sure you're monitoring that they're making progress.
Diane, there's a question along the side that's not strictly speaking compliance related, but I don't know if you or Scott want to take a stab at it. If Scott's here, I don't know. Because it asks about, aside from instructional coaching or sub-cost for PD, is there any option to use Title IIA to help fund staffing, tutoring, to directly support students to increase capacity to serve students? And
so for 2A, it is for building teachers' capacity, not as much for building for direct student services. So it's an indirect, it's indirectly affecting or improving student results by building the teachers' capacity to be able to implement new instructional strategies, gain knowledge about their content area. So when you're thinking about your 2A funds, not only do you want to think about just for coaching, and coaching is one way of improving teacher capacity. However, think about other ways that there is, such as incentives for teachers to work towards master teacher certification, or that higher licensure area instead of where they currently are, would be an allowable use for Title II. If you're using Title IIA for class size reduction, that's one way that you can use it to reduce class sizes. However, the whole point of class size reduction is so that they're actually changing how they teach and providing more differentiated, diversified instruction to students. So how can you support those class size reduction teachers then, or that grade level, so that instructional practices are changing as well? Plus, they need to be at a level where it's actually evidence-based, the class sizes. So that's another. So is there a cheat sheet for the non-publics? Everything you need to be able to know and do? I believe, Chantel, I don't know if you're on the line, but I believe there is a non-public guidance on this. And Karen, if you reach out to your federal programs consultant, they can get you a copy of that. Now, it's not like a checklist, which is what I always like, is a checklist. Do I have this or do I have that? But yes. And of course, yes, there is the building worksheet that we do for non-publics that will be available once the compliance system opens. Thanks, Chantel. Do we have any other questions?
Diane, do you want to give a quick plug for your new coordinators training, or is there anything else you want to touch on? I know you have a meeting here in about 5 minutes or so.
Well, the new coordinators meeting is, we're just really going to talk about how do you get organized and prepared for a compliance visit.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about a little bit about, where to find compliance in the system and those things, and what you need to do to be able to make sure that you have the correct role to be able to get into compliance. So it really is for those who haven't been doing this for a long time, but are really new to the whole thing. So so the FY21 compliance, we are hoping that it will open up by the middle of December for you. At that time, you'll be able to even make a copy of the questions then that are in the system.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, Diane, but she might have been asking for next year, like the compliance that we're going to do for next year, because she's asking about the criteria. If you're looking at Regina's question.
I am looking at Regina's. So this is, I think this is FY21, I believe, for.
Well, we're conducting the FY21, but it's for the year. Well, I guess it depends on how you look at compliance, right? But
yeah, it's for this year's.
Yeah.
Right.
So Regina, she answered your question properly. If you were asking about the other thing, we'll develop one. They're going to be very similar to what they were last year. We might have to tweak them because of everything that we're all going through, but we'll do that a little bit later in the year, more likely in the spring. But again, most of the questions are going to remain exactly the same, but some of the things we look at, for example, carryover, is going to look a lot different this year than it has in the past. And so I will be quiet now.
So they did have a question on the risk factor system, and we are definitely, using risk factors to determine who is getting their on-sites and their desk reviews. We have added a few more risk factors this year. One is the large carryovers for non-publics. Was added this year. So if you continue to have problems with spending your non-public funds, that's been a risk factor. Those who have to self-report on comparability for multiple years in a row is a risk factor, simply because that means that things haven't really been corrected or updated in EMIS so that they're able to provide, complete their comparability through the system that's provided. So there are some new risk factors that were added this year. I'm trying to think of some of the others. Jim, can you remember?
I mean, the non-public carryover is a good one. There are going to be some specific for ESSER.
That's
but
correct.
Those are the main ones. I don't think, and the comparability one that you alluded to. But those are the main things we've added. I don't know, if we're gonna, find anything, that we need to add to it or not. So the list of risk factors we used for determining this year, we have them someplace, Tricia. I can find them for you.
What I can do is when we create the folder for FY21 compliance monitoring in the doc library, and I'll be working on that this week, getting some of our pages updated and in there. I'll add the risk factor list there too as well. So it'll be like a one-stop shop for you. You don't have to go looking everywhere for things. All right. Well, I have to jump off to another meeting. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please, if you have any other questions, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. We don't want you stressing over these things or worrying about them, but just ask us, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them and ease your worries a little. So, Jim, do you have anything else?
No, I don't. Thank you very much, Diane, for all your help and patience with me. And thank you, the rest of you, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Yeah.
Stay healthy.
Exactly. And Candace alluded to the how the document or the recording can be found after this fact. So thanks again, folks. Take care.
Thank you.